All right, let's do this. We are going to be filming our podcast this week. I don't know why. I just felt inspired to be seen, to be on video, and I don't know, to be like a full experience kind of experience. So if you're only into audio, check out the podcast Soul-Led and Satisfied AF on Spotify. And if you're finding this on YouTube or wherever else I posted it, and you just like to look at someone as they're talking, you're welcome. What I'm waving around is my wand. It can go in here. Been carrying it around lately because of the Queen of Wands workshop that is coming up. Super duper excited. This will come out after the Queen of Wands workshop. So if you want access to that, reach out, let me know. Or if you have questions about it, reach out, let me know, and I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, welcome to, as you can just tell, I pressed record on the podcast. If you're wondering who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about, I'm also doing this as a YouTube video, just being really re-inspired to activate my presence on YouTube. I've been doing timeless readings. So if you're really into, or even just slightly mildly into tarot readings, oracle readings, and getting like more tangible, juicy guidance from the universe, I highly, highly recommend you going out, finding YouTube, finding my channel. I'll of course link it all below, and checking out those readings. My intention with those, just FYI, is that they are timeless, even if they come out on a semi-regular basis. Like genuinely, if you find them and they inspire you and they resonate, they are meant for you whenever you find them. That's why, also if you go and read a book, it can be written 50 years ago and it can still land with you. It can still stir your heart. It can still inspire your imagination and help you take action towards greatness and your goals and your dreams. And it's the same thing with tarot readings. Now, on that note, slightly, tarot has inspired me and guided me to create a workshop called the Queen of Wands workshop. Now, many of you have already attended because this is coming out the day after the Queen of Wands workshop. But if you missed out or you're watching this well into the future, my invitation is, if you're feeling called to live a life and run a business or do your purpose work in the world, whatever that may be, your intuition, your creativity, your passion, your desire, like how you are walking in this world as the fullness of you, and you want to be more grounded in your authenticity, more seated in your power, more divinely guided by self, soul, source, the universe, all of the things, and not just hustling and grinding and doing it the traditional way. The Queen of Wands workshop is for you, and I want you to reach out and let me know that you're curious about it, and I will of course let you know how you can get your hands on it. Today we are talking about, in the podcast, however, something a little bit left field for me: Norse runes. That is not my area of expertise. That is 1000% not something I'm going to stand up and say I know everything about or even much about. But when I was doing my journaling earlier this week, like early, wee hours of the morning on Monday, I was communing with Kali, who's the goddess I work with the most, and I was gazing out the window. The sun was, sort of coming up, so there's a little bit of light, and I closed my eyes and I saw a rune. Well, what I thought was a rune. And like I said, I don't really know runes very well. So I was like, oh, in my brain, this looks like a rune. So I wrote it down on my hand and I decided to look it up. It was a rune. It was the Thurisaz. I probably did not say that correctly, rune. And it really inspired me. It really inspired me because what I'd been journaling on was, how can I show up as more of me in my communities? And how can I make sure that, of course, that the way I'm showing up doesn't derail my business? This podcast is all about being soul-led and satisfied, as you know, and that requires us to be tuning in and connecting in and following our intuition and following our whispers and listening to our guides and taking action. But the human part of us, the 3D part of us, the tangible, we need to go out in the world and do shit part of us, does consider the impact on people, on existing structures, on what we're currently doing, and what it might mean if we're divinely, heavenly inspired to go in a different direction, or simply just turn it up a little bit. And that was very heavily on my mind because as we head towards the end of 2023, like it's the 12th of December when I'm recording this, a third of the way through December and nearly to the end of the year. And it's so interesting how already the stirring energies of this transition month. For me, December is a bridge between one year and the next, and it is so common and it is so normal for all of us, but especially those of us who are highly attuned to the energies of the world, who maybe follow a bit more of a creative path where like chaos and like all the elements are constantly mixing and alchemizing and transforming. When we are like attuned in that way, or deeply sensitive in that way, we notice in these transition periods. And they happen all of the time. It can be like Sunday to Monday, the last day of the month to the next, like the first day of the next month, the start of the year, the end of the year, the start of a season, the end of the season. And then, even moon cycles and things like that. When we are that sensitive and when we are that attuned, and like, if this is resonating and this is landing, like reach out and let me know on social media as well. It's always good to know you're not alone and you're not going crazy. But when we are this sensitive, it can really sometimes be challenging because we're feeling the call, we're feeling the urge, we're on this energetic roller coaster and we can go with it or we can like fight against it, both of which can be very challenging, both of which can be very scary. But I think we all know in the soul-led and satisfied way of being in life and being in business and being on our purpose path, it is so much better to go with the flow. So when I saw this rune and then I looked it up and it was a real one, and I was like sort of contemplating, well, what does this mean for me? What is this reflecting to me? It was very on point. Now, the rune, like I said, I'm not an expert, but this one, it was like all these different words. You can totally look it up. I'll also link the article that I was reading when I dove into this a little bit more just to get my own grounding and foundation. It was talking about this is often a challenge, an obstacle, chaos, and conflict. In the positive sense, it can be like the Tower card in tarot. Like that's how I interpreted it, where things come to this chaotic, sometimes catastrophic conclusion because we need to break free, or we need to get that kick in the butt, or there is something that needs to be torn down so we can grow, so we can transform, so we can become either who we're meant to be or go where we're meant to go, or release what is no longer meant for us or was never meant for us. So it was a very sort of on brand energetically for this time of the year and this space in my business where I too am going, what do I want to shed? What no longer works for me? And being radically, rawly, powerfully honest about that. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but it means it's necessary to me personally, at least. And if you were to see this rune in, let's say, the position of opposition, it might also represent that there are misfortunes or difficulties or bad luck and different things like this, like negative. Maybe we're getting in our own way. Maybe we are the source of the conflict. Maybe the resistance and the resentment and the just the negativity that has built up exists because we aren't acting in alignment. We're not walking on our soul's path. We're not being true and authentic to ourselves and us and our souls and the situation that we're in. So I wanted to talk about that today. I wanted to talk about not only the rune, but this energy of conflict and how we can all be very deeply reactive to certain things. I'm going to bring this in this moment to business specifically and apply this in your business specifically where you are called to, where it resonates the most, where you see yourself not acting in alignment, not responding in accordance to what you know or sense is true. And something that's been very real for me lately, because I've been doing it in the positive sense, is when I ask my spirit guides, when I check in with my spirit team, when I use my tools, my cards, my dice, my pendulum, like whatever it is, when I ask, I listen and I act in accordance. That is something that has been such a gift to myself in developing my self trust, in deepening my spiritual connection, honing my intuition, and also showing up more powerfully for myself and for my purpose path. So, just a bit of a tangent there. If you're finding hard to connect to your guides, or you always feel like you're out of alignment, or you're always in chaos and conflict, my invitation to you is to examine your relationship with your higher self and the universe. Are you desperately hoping and wishing, but not responding? Are you asking and asking, asking for guidance and then ignoring the signs? Are you seeing the signs, journaling on the signs, contemplating the signs, seeing and sensing that it'd be a good idea to follow those signs, and yet either defaulting to old habits and conditioning, having more conflict and chaos internally and externally? Or perhaps you're just pretending on maybe a conscious or subconscious level that you don't know what to do. I want to say here as well, depending on where you're at and what type of decisions in your life and in your business you're making, it is really challenging to act on faith, especially when the 3D reality that you're currently in isn't reflective of what you desire it to be. And it's nearly so far from what your soul is saying is possible. It almost feels like completely like a dream, like a fantasy, and maybe even a bit like a children's book. You're like, yeah, that would be nice, but let's get real. So honor yourself in this moment and just simply acknowledge also it can be hard to follow our faith, our intuition, our trust. On that note, if you're really calling or feeling the call rather to deepening your faith and acting in trust and following through, I would highly recommend you checking out the podcast episode on, it's called something like Navigating Your Business with Faith. I think it's the one I did last week. So you just search for that, check it out, or send me a message if you need me to point you in the right direction. All right. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this rune, and I wanted to talk about conflict and chaos, and I've gone on these tangents around your faith and your trust and asking the universe for help and following through or not, is because when we are operating from a place of defensiveness and reactivity, we just cannot feel safe. It is almost like if we're only acting from the mind and we're acting from the conditioning and we're acting from the fear and we're reinforcing the chaos, even if we're moving forward in life or in business, even if we're making progress on our goals, it is undermined by that internal misalignment. And this really stops us from growing. It stops us from being seated and grounded in our power, all the things that we're going to be talking about on the Queen of Wands workshop. So make sure to reach out if that is really calling to you and you know that is something you need to work on. But when we can get on board with this idea of, I want to act from a place of owning what needs to change and honoring what I'm authentically feeling called to, and even acknowledging when stuff is a shit show, messed up, conflict, chaos. And just like when we see the tarot tower card, we don't run from that. We lean into it. We go, okay, something isn't working. This chaos is a sign that something isn't right. This conflict is a sign that this is unaligned. What do we need to do? And we take responsibility and we get proactive and we get curious and we rely on our faith and our intuition and our whispers to guide us through it. It might mean you need to have some boundaries with yourself, with the people around you, with your business. You may even need to establish some boundaries with your own mind, what you will and will not. Let me try that again. What you will and will not listen to. how you will and will not act, how you will and will not respond. I've really noticed in myself and in my clients that sometimes the most insidious thing in our business or in the way that we're operating towards our goals is we have these patterns of reactive behavior when, X, Y, or Z happens. I have to drop everything else, dive all in, cut myself off from Soul Source and anything else I'm doing in the moment, and solely focus on this. This is just one example, of course, but I've really recognized it as just a way that we assume that's the only way to deal with the situation. That in and of itself is something we can apply boundaries to. That in and of itself could be the greatest gift you give yourself of time and spaciousness and safety to act from a place of higher truth and higher knowledge. All right. I had some questions inspired by the rune, and I wanted to share them here on the podcast as well. Now, the rune itself is often referred to as the thorn. It's a thorn rune, and when you see it, you can kind of see how it looks like a thorn. It's like a line and then a little triangle perpendicular to it, this little pointy thorn. And that's representative of the pain and the conflict and the difficulty. If you've ever had a thorn in your shoe, if you've ever picked up a flower and pricked yourself, you know that it is sharp, it is painful, and it is not always nice to have that happen to you. And we might find, we might notice that there are little thorny issues in the way we're running our life and our business at the moment. That is the real gift of the Tower card, of the Thorn rune, of the conflict and the chaos, because they are big red flags that say there is something here to be worked on, released, reduced, totally taken out, maybe reworked, but there is something here for us to work on. So these questions are going to help you reflect deeper. You might want to journal on them. You might want to have a discussion with someone. You might simply contemplate them in your mind. What I want to say before we even go into the questions, though, is you take the time to actually implement any realizations you have. This is where you step into that faith, you step into that trust, you step into, well, if I've asked the question and I've received an answer, I'm going to show that I'm listening. I'm going to show that I actually am taking this seriously. And if you feel that when you journal or you reflect, you question, well, it's just my limited mind or experience or knowledge, or maybe my fears are talking and not my higher self, I would invite you to make this a really sacred activity then. You may wish to do some scripting. You write the question and you hand it over to Source to give you the answer. You may wish to pull some cards. You may want to do this in a meditative state. Perhaps there is another way that you personally connect with your guides, your spirit team. Maybe you go for a walk and you contemplate these questions and allow what arises, what you're inspired to think or realize or process as the answer. Okay, here are the questions. Number 1, where are there other thorns in your life that can be lovingly extracted? So these prickly points. And on a side note here, I want to also point out that you don't have to put up with the prickly parts of your life or business. If there are truly things that annoy you, frustrate you, anger you, pain you, because they are not in alignment, because they are not authentically your soul's truth or part of your purpose and your mission, you're allowed to remove them. You are allowed to get creative and find ways to either not have to do them at all or do them in a way that they don't pain you. That in and of itself could be all you focus on, and it would be such a gift. Question number 2, what changes when defensiveness and reactivity are replaced with your beautiful boundaries and genuine, authentic expression? What would change when we release that defensiveness, when we release that reactivity, when we're no longer feeding into the chaos and instead are showing up for ourselves, showing up for our business, showing up for whatever beautiful magic you're making in the world from a place of beautiful boundaries, genuine, authentic expression, and you in all your you-ness. Another one that could just be a whole gift in and of itself. Finally, our third question. How might you approach current conflicts or challenges as growth opportunities or ways to seek support or guidance from those around you? Sometimes when we are in conflict, we often isolate and shut down. The true gift in community is that we don't have to go it alone. And I believe that every single person ever needs a community around them, needs people who not necessarily are going through the same things, but will love and support you through the things that you're going through because they know you'll do the same for them. If you're not part of a community that is supportive and intuitive and creative and caring about authentic soul expression in life and in business, I invite you to come join us in the Soul Led and Satisfied membership. We are a beautiful community. We have a lot of live trainings, and you're always able to reach out and get support if you need it. If you'd like to join us, I'll leave all the details below. All right, this has been a little bit of a circuitous, introspective, kind of challenging conversation today. And I love it because when we are following the path of our intuition, as I am with the content I put out and how I express myself, I allow things to come out in the way that they're presented to me in the moment. And that's not always linear and that's not always, let's say, logical. But for me, when I create content, that is part of my faith, that I trust that I'll say what needs to be said, that what I create needs to be created, and that the people who need to hear it will hear it. It's just one of the many ways that we get to embrace our intuition, act in faith, and powerfully, confidently navigate conflict, challenge, and the mysteries that will always be present in life. In this moment, I invite you to, if you're called to, of course, re-listen to this episode, work on those questions, and ask yourself some more. What do you need to ask yourself today? I'd love to hear if something came up and through for you. All right, thank you for joining me for another beautiful episode of the Soul Led and Satisfied as Fuck podcast. Now, we will be having a break over the Christmas holidays. I'm officially off from the 20th of December, of course, to the 11th of January. I don't intend to have any podcasts coming out during that time, so we'll be back for season 2 after the 11th of January. If you have any requests for what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like me to speak about, or even some suggestions on what you would find valuable and helpful on your soul-led and satisfied path, please make sure to reach out to me. You can do this on socials or you can do this via email, all of which you can find in the description below. All right. Thank you for joining me. Have a magical day, and I will see you next time.